Now, there's some great news today. From this morning, everyone over the age of 38 will be able to book their coronavirus vaccine.
But this good news comes amidst worrying reports about the Indian variant, which Prime Minister Boris Johnson has said is of increasing concern.
Well, the government's scientific advisory group, SAGE, is set to hold a meeting to discuss the new variant today. So to bring us all the facts, we're joined now by Dr. Sara and also epidemiologist Professor Tim Spector. All the way through this, we've tried to be level and careful about the way we report these things because the Kent variant became a variant of concern in December. The South African variant became a concern in December 2020 as well, rising from a variant of interest. So here's another one that is now a variant of concern, yet our numbers continue to fall. So there are always going to be these new variants. There will always be the threat, because you're seeing today that SAGE, who, a little bit doom and gloom occasionally, and a lot of what they've said has not necessarily quite come to fruition, which is good, brilliant as they are. So how worried should we be about something like this? Because it's quite easy on the verge of coming out of lockdown, in the way we're coming out, for something like this to really knock our spirits.
I think that, there are going to be mutations, as you say. There are constantly going to be mutations. Viruses mutate, that's what they do. There'll be thousands of them. And occasionally, some of those mutations will be significant enough to make a change. Now, in the case of this Indian variant, they've made it a variant of concern because it fulfills one of the 7 criteria, either that it's, easily transmissible, that it might evade our immune system or the vaccines. One of those kind of criteria.
The big one for us is, I think, if it evades the vaccine. That's the biggie. That undoes the work or makes it harder that we've already done.
Yes, I think all of our restriction easing is dependent on the vaccination programme, which has been incredible thus far. So far, the data is, of course, limited, but the European Medicines Agency have said that the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines, the ones that use mRNA, seem to be effective for the Indian variant. We're still looking into the AstraZeneca one, but early, studies are showing that it probably is going to be effective. Maybe not so much in catching the virus, but certainly in reducing deaths and severity of disease.
And can people sort of compare the variants against each other? Because obviously you sort of had the Kent variant that came in, and that seemed to be people could catch it a lot more quickly from one another. I mean, is this Indian variant that's coming over, is it worse? Is it more dangerous?
So far, it suggests that it's at least as transmissible as the UK Kent variant, maybe more so, but currently, it's similar to
we don't
the Kent
know,
variant.
do we?
We just don't know yet. We do need so much more worldwide real data, not just lab data, and that will come through.
The thing is that these things crop up, and all the way through, we've been talking to people like you and virologists and epidemiologists and experts in the field and scientists, people who develop the vaccine. That there is always going to be a bit of a lag with research because these things are ongoing, and it was always going to be perhaps a case that if one particular part of the world suffered severely, and my God, how horrific it is in India right now, that some sort of variant would occur. Is also the fact that looking at the pockets where this variant seems to be on the rise, are certainly areas where that community may very well have been over to check on their families and make sure that they're okay.
Yes, it could have been that. I mean, there's also the element that we know that there's still not a high uptake in vaccinations in certain ethnic groups, of which, the South Asian community is one. And so it could be that's also attributing to that. And this is why it's another plea out there, just for anyone who is being invited for their vaccination to please go ahead and do it.
And when we look at our roadmap, so far we've hit every one of those markers, just as was predicted, just as they said it would happen. And on Monday, we've got another one. We'll be able to see people inside, eat inside, things like that. If this variant continues and the research is done and SAGE are looking in it today, could that affect our unlocking of the roadmap?
I think we know that our plans to unlock the roadmap have always depended on our vaccination programme. And so I do think we need to know how effective this vaccine is going to be against this variant. But, I think we also need to keep our goalposts fluid. I think we've learnt from previous mistakes, you know, that we've kind of set ourselves, you know, sometimes unrealistic goals. But I think it's really important that we just are fluid here and we just go with what the science is suggesting.
Okay. And so what about the winter? Because, again, that's another thing that has been... It was huge at first. It was going to be terrible. Then it went away, a little bit of backtracking going on. And there is still talk about another wave in the winter.
We know that respiratory viruses always flourish in the winter. It's their ideal environment. So it is likely that COVID, like the other coronaviruses, does increase throughout the winter months. But that's exactly why we're trying to get everyone vaccinated before we get to that point in order to prevent that spike.
Makes perfect sense. All right, let's speak to Professor Tim Spector now. Thank you for joining us. So yesterday, good news once again. It was announced that 38 and 39-year-olds are the next group to be offered the vaccine. There is a little bit of concern, younger people being told that they may be more likely to experience side effects from it. Could you just alleviate any concerns and what sort of side effects those would be?
Well, the first thing is that the side effects are actually relatively infrequent, so most people don't get side effects. That's really important to realise. So in our data from the Zoe app of over 1 million people who've logged their vaccines with us, you know, we're only talking about 1 in 4 people experiencing some side effects. Now, that varies a bit between the vaccines, but in general, younger people are more likely to have some minor side effects than older people, and women are more likely to have side effects slightly more than men. But in general, even if you do have them, they are really things like fatigue, headache, which will last a day, maybe 2, and then go away. So given how effective these vaccines are, I think these are relatively trivial problems for the vast majority of people, or none at all.
Well, those people who've had... Holly's had her first vaccine, had absolutely no side effects whatsoever. I've had my first vaccine, had a sort of, if I pressed it, a minor bruise on my arm, all of which, you know, so I'm perfectly happy with that. But also, a lot of the side effects are similar to the ones you get with any vaccine, that if you were going on holiday and you had to have your holiday jabs, they can make you feel a bit rough for a couple of days.
Yes, exactly. And I think that's what people really need to understand, that, you know, and having a bit of pain in the arm, which interestingly is slightly more with the Pfizer than with the AstraZeneca vaccine, is part of having any inoculation. And I think people need to realise that if they do have this vaccine, they are going to be protected against COVID, and our data is now showing that, and also showing that they're going to get a milder form of the disease, so that it's much more likely to be have no respiratory symptoms at all, only 1 or 2 symptoms, if any. And so this is where we're moving into this new era, because most people have now been vaccinated. We're seeing cases have actually crept up in the last week, according to the Zoe app, which is always giving us the latest data. But I'm not worried about that. I'm not worried about the variant, because all these cases are really very mild.
Well, Tim, we were talking about the variant. That's how we started our conversation with Sara. So your thoughts as an expert here on the Indian variant, which is obviously in the news at the moment. It is of concern, but others have been as well. It could knock us off our roadmap. So is that a little bit of hysteria creeping in?
Yeah, there's been lots of pessimists, really, and I think you've only got to look at our data to show that we are still one of the lowest rates in Europe, and we're talking about 2,000 or 2,500 cases a day compared to 70,000 in January, and you know, we're doing really well, and those 2,500 cases are much milder than they were a few months ago. So the NHS is not being overwhelmed, and people are not having these really bad respiratory symptoms, and they're probably not going to get as much long COVID as well. So I'm really relaxed about this, and I think there's been a bit of hysteria about these variants, and you've only got to really look at the data to tell us that you know, we are doing very well, we're coming out of this, and we should just be a bit more sensible. And yeah, we need to keep an eye on it, survey it, but every time a new variant gets discovered, we shouldn't go into panic, because other countries are not doing that.
And also, just finally, Sara did that a moment ago, to urge those maybe parts of our community who are wary of vaccinations to make sure that they take the opportunity?
Absolutely. I think the reason we're at these low levels is because vaccines work. And it doesn't matter which vaccine you take, they're all working, including the Moderna one. They all have low rates of side effects, so the chances are you're going to feel absolutely nothing after it. And if you are unlucky to get infected after your vaccine, you're going to have a really mild disease that will just be at most like a bit of a cold for a day or two, or you may not even feel it. So it is really worthwhile, everyone doing this, so we can get as quickly back to near normal as we can and treat this like just a mild flu or a cold and get on with life.
Thank you.
And so anyone really should not only take a vaccine, but also if you can log on the Zoe app, your side effects and how you got on with it and whether you get reinfected, that would also really help us keep an eye on things for the next few months.
Thank you very
Tim.
much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Good to talk to you. Thank you,
Thanks, Sara.
Sara.